Talia Hart.
Good evening. How's everyone doing tonight?
Good.
Great, good to go. So welcome to Business Talks. This is the San Francisco's Mayoral Forum. We're so excited to have everyone here today, and we're super appreciative of all of our participators, over 20 organizations that partnered with us to have a successful day talking to city leaders. So let's give all 20 organizations a big round of applause. A special thank you to our sponsors this evening. My good friend Jim, the CEO of the Bay Area Council, is here. Visa is our sponsor, and the CEO of Postmates, which I'll introduce in one moment. But we want to thank you again to talk tonight about some very pressing issues facing the city and what these candidates' expectations and opinions are on these things. The Chamber serves over 2,500 business members and represents over 200,000 employees throughout the city. So I'm going to get started. First, is Janice arrived yet? I'd like Janice to be the chair of our board to please stand and give her. So without further ado, I welcome Bastian Lehman, the CEO of Postmates.
Thank you for the introduction and for hosting us today, Talia. Good evening, everyone. Keeping this short and hopefully somewhat informative. It's a pleasure to join the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce for this important dialogue of the future of our city. For myself, as an immigrant, there is no doubt that today San Francisco is strong and only getting stronger. I believe it's a jet-propelled engine of job creation and the home court of creativity around the world. And we achieve this not just through innovation, but in my personal view, through inclusion. That's why I'm especially proud to stand here in front of all of you today. As an immigrant, as someone who served in uniform abroad, and as the CEO of a technology company. What we've been able to build is only possible because of the magic of this city. My company, Postmates, was born in Soho, just a few blocks away. And in just a few short years, we've not only generated more than 500 jobs, but we've also created a cutting-edge online marketplace that enables residents to connect with local businesses and get whatever they need, whenever they need it, delivered to their doors. And that means that senior citizens in Bayview are able to access health and wellness products and groceries through the tap of a button. It means that mom and pop shops, bakeries, hardware stores, taquerias in the Mission Excelsior, in Richmond, and in countless communities across the country have been able to sell more than $1 billion worth of goods last year on our platform, local businesses. And that means also that San Francisco residents, your constituents, have been able to earn $50 million in additional income by performing these deliveries last year. And while I'm proud that a report that we'll release next month finds that brick and mortar retail sales in San Francisco has grown 4x due to platforms like ours, the truth and the fact is that there's more work to do. Because while we can all be proud of San Francisco, we can also acknowledge that not all of us have yet to fully share in the prosperity of our city. That's why this could be not a more important time to invest in protecting a future that works for everybody. And as the CEO of a technology company, I stand before the current and future government of San Francisco with a simple message. Let's work together. As business leaders, we must build greater empathy for government, just as much as our city leaders have an opportunity to show greater empathy towards businesses. If we can work together in extending the hand of innovation and unclenching the fist of blame, we can collaborate to unleash R&D in service of the city's most vulnerable populations. If we partner with the MTA, we can ensure advanced transportation technologies help those most in need to transit access instead of just clogging our streets and bike lanes. If we work with the mayor's office of workforce development, we can guide apprenticeships and skill programs to empower our workforce while supporting the rise of the gig and sharing economy. If the Board of Supervisors works with tech to build smart rules for emerging technologies like robots, we can ensure data is used to support the SFPD and the disabled community. And if we work with the school board on the skills and curricula behind we can inspire the next generation of teachers, CEOs, and mayors in San Francisco. This is the time for 21st century San Francisco. And together, we can be working partners, not sparring partners. I look forward to hearing the visions of our candidates tonight. And to each of you, please know this. In Postmates and myself, you have a friend vested in inclusive communities with equitable outcomes. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's moderator, San Francisco Chronicle columnist and KPIX regular, Phil Matier. And I also like to introduce Jim Wonderman, President and CEO of the Bay Area Council. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, good evening. Thank you, Bastian, for the very, very thoughtful comments. I agree with everything you said and appreciate the Postmates leadership. Thanks everybody for being here. I want to recognize our partners and leaders in San Francisco, the Chamber of Commerce. It's a great organization. Back a long time ago, I had the honor of serving as chairman of the board, and it was a great experience. And you should all, if you're not members of the Chamber of Commerce, you should be. So that's my plug for my sister organization tonight. Going on to run the Bay Area Council, which a number of you hear from our organization as well. And we're a regional group that tries to bring the Bay Area together to solve increasingly challenging problems, most of them of the making from the incredible economic success which defines the Bay Area. We are indeed the envy of regions around the world. Bay Area is just about as good as San Francisco. It's hard to imagine the Bay Area being successful if San Francisco is not doing well. So we want to do well with San Francisco, certainly not despite it. And there certainly are a number of challenges that the city is facing, and those are the things I think we'll probably be focused on here tonight. So listen attentively. We're pleased to have Phil Matier moderate the discussion. It's my honor to introduce the candidates for the mayor of the city and county of San Francisco. First, former president of the Board of Supervisors and civil rights trial attorney, Angela Alioto.
To have a seat at the table.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for being here, both in the audience and the people who are running. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of stamina, and you have to answer the same questions over and over and over again. And so after a while, yeah, you're nodding like, just nodding. So, we're going to try to at least get yourself out there, because that's what this is about, all right? So, I know you all are going to have an open statement. I have a sense that everybody's going to bring everybody to the table. I think you're going to talk with all the stakeholders. We're going to all do database, thoughtful solutions to the problem, because we're going to listen to everybody. We're going to get the special interests out of City Hall. Maybe not all of them, because they're here tonight. And just going to bring common sense and good feedback in. So that we know we're all going to say that. So, in a quick 2-minute pitch, starting with him and working all the way down, tell us why you should be hired. Hi. You're asking them to hire you as the mayor of San Francisco.
I'm asking you to elect me, Phil. Thank you all very, very much for being here. I want to thank my fellow candidates. We did this like the other night. Last night was a very rowdy one with lots of people on the west side of the city. This is an incredible city and extremely involved democratically. So I want to thank them and you for all being here tonight. I'm running for mayor of San Francisco because as a born and raised San Franciscan, I simply cannot believe the state of our city. The streets are filthy. The homeless are all over the city. And those that are living in tents are living in tents as though that's okay. As though the city is saying, yes, we're a city of billionaires, and yes, it's okay you poor people can live in tents, in poverty, in filth. And that is not okay with me. As a born and raised San Franciscan, the crime rate is skyrocketed in crimes that affect daily citizens, whether it is the car break-ins or burglaries in your homes. It has skyrocketed, and we do not have enough police officers to attend to it. So I am for full staffing of the San Francisco Police Department. I am for full staffing of the fire department and the emergency services. I think it is absolutely imperative that we have those three services full staff so that they can attend to the citizens of the city, and so that we can try our best to stop the epidemic of crime that is occurring to regular citizens throughout the city. So those are the reasons that I'm running, and lastly, certainly not the reasons of political housing. As some of you may know, I ran in 2003, and it's just formidable to me that the majority of the people that supported me then don't live here now. I've made a lot of calls lately in the fundraising that's involved in running for mayor of San Francisco, and it is stunning how many people don't live here anymore because they simply can't afford it. It's stunning how few families. I'm a mother of 4 and grandmother of 5, and it's so sad to me that San Francisco is sustainable in the city that it was when I was growing up here, which meant clean parks, which meant great schools, which meant a city where you're so proud to be from. Done? Done means I'm over?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you all very, very much.
Good evening, everybody. My name is London Breed, and I'm running for mayor here in San Francisco. And I was really fortunate to grow up in a city where I was able to go to public schools. I went to UC Davis and graduated, and I came back to work for the community that I love, the community where sadly the violence and the crime and the issues continue to tear lives of members of my community apart. I have dedicated my entire life to service. I went to USF. I got my master's in public administration there. I served on the Redevelopment Agency Commission as well as the Fire Commission, and I also was the executive director of an amazing art center, the African American Art and Culture Complex on Fulton and Webster Street. And what I'm most proud of is during the time that I've worked in the community, I know with the programs I implemented, with the funds I raised for those programs, that we saved and we changed lives for the better. We improved public safety. We helped people with housing issues. We made sure that our community's voices were heard at City Hall. It's why I ran for the Board of Supervisors, because I wanted to make sure that someone who understood what it feels like to grow up in those circumstances had a seat at the table to make the kinds of decisions that's not going to keep people in poverty, but actually is going to change someone's life. And so I am honored to be here. I never thought I'd even be on the Board of Supervisors, let alone running for mayor of the city and county of San Francisco. And I have a vision to change our city for the better. When you walk outside, there's no tents, there's more housing, there's more police officers. There's a city where you feel good when you walk outside, and it takes a lot of work to get there. It takes bold, creative ideas. It takes making sure you're willing to take risks. I've been taking risks all my life, stepping out on faith to do what is oftentimes unpopular to do, and I will do that as your mayor so that you can feel the difference in San Francisco.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay back there? Okay, my name is Richie Greenberg, and I am running for mayor, and I would like your vote because I've lived here for 17 years with my wife in the Richmond district. I am on the SF GOP. I am looking to be the next Giuliani for San Francisco, which means I am looking to restore calm, looking to take back the streets, and I have a whole long list, actually, of issues. Everything going from small business, supporting small businesses. I'm pro-family, children, elderly. We need to keep our children here in this city. We need to support the police department. I'm very pro-police. We need not only to get our staffing levels up to the 1,971 officers that we were mandated, but I would propose to bring them even higher than that, because the number 1971 is based on decades ago. We now have growth in the city, growth of population, and the police are now outnumbered. I believe we should also rejoin the JTTF, the Joint Terrorism Task Force. I am looking at modifying sanctuary city laws. It should not be one way or another. We need to have compromise, and so forth. Honestly, I am embarrassed. My wife is embarrassed. I am embarrassed with my friends of how San Francisco looks today. When I moved here 17 years ago, it was not like this. We should not be embarrassed. We should instead take back the city. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jane Kim, and I have had the honor and pleasure of serving the city in the capacity as a Board of Education member and now as a member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. And I represent a very dynamic district, which includes the South of Market, Mission Bay, Treasure Island, and the Tenderloin. And many of the members of the Chamber of Commerce or home is in the district that I represent, and so I do a lot of work with you. San Francisco has the fastest growing income gap in the country, according to the Brookings Institute. And I think one of the most important issues local government should be working to address is trying to figure out how we can regrow our middle class again. In 1990, the middle class made up 90% of San Francisco's population. As of 2012, that number has dropped to 33%, and I imagine that over the last 5 years, it has dropped even more. One of the things that I have worked on for my last 7 years on the Board of Supervisors is to ensure that we are still a thriving economy, because it is what allows us to be a wealthy city, to fund many of the services and infrastructure needs that we have, but figuring out how to invest those resources back in the community that helps regrow our middle class. I'm proud of the fact that I have won and negotiated more affordable and middle-income housing than any city legislator over the last 7 years, and that my district is building 54% of all of San Francisco's affordable housing. By the way, 60% of San Franciscans qualify for affordable housing under federal HUD guidelines. I'm also really proud to have worked on an initiative in 2016, and I thank our big property owners who participate in that, in making San Francisco the only city in the country to make community college free again. And we had our inaugural semester in August of 2017, and we saw a 51% increase in enrollment of San Francisco residents. We know that community college is our only lifelong institution, and as the workforce changes, as the future of work changes, it's incredibly important that we fund and invest in an institution that allows our workforce to continually uptrain and upskill in order to move forward. Finally, I'm proud to have worked with the Chamber of Commerce on the Fair Chance Act, which is giving those with a conviction and arrest record on their record an opportunity to work again, and I look forward to doing more work like this in the future with you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mark Leto, and I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce. I am, as you probably know, a 40-year business owner in San Francisco, and I think I'm the only one who is on the panel tonight who served on the board of directors of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce from 1996 to 1998 before taking an appointment to the County Board of Supervisors, where I served until 2002. At which time I was elected to the California State Assembly, where I served until 2008, when I was then elected to the California State Senate, where I served until 2016. I am running for mayor because I believe it's time for a new direction at City Hall. Our crises of homelessness, affordability, traffic and congestion, street crime are out of control. And we need a mayor who is going to think big and regionally, boldly, and reject cynicism. We can get this done. And don't let anyone tell you that we can't. And then demand results. I've also put forward a fair campaign promise. And in that promise, I have rejected and denounced super PAC spending in this race. And I want to thank Amy and Jane and Angela for signing that pledge with me. And I encourage the other candidates who have not yet done so to do so. And the reason this is so important is because San Francisco voters deserve the right to be able to choose our next mayor without the corrupting influence of unregulated, secret money. We don't need it. So if you think the city is going great and you like the status quo, I'm probably not your candidate. But otherwise, I ask you for your vote.
Hello, everyone. I am Amy Fairwhite. I grew up in San Jose. I was the first generation of my family to go to college. I went to Danza Community College in Silicon Valley in Cupertino, then went to UC Santa Cruz, and I've been focused ever since. So that's 20 years that I've been focused on doing direct service work to organizational development and program development in a variety of fields, from mental health to transitional housing to leadership and development to harm reduction. So I'm actually a worker in those programs. I got a master's degree from San Francisco State in 2010, focused on organizational development, and then I got hooked on global policy. So it was after the global financial collapse, and let's be real, San Francisco has been shaken up a few times. I was around in '89 for the earthquake, but then we had the tech boom of the late 90s, and that caused massive displacement. And then we had some time to recover and stabilize, but then we had we had a global financial collapse. And there was an opportunity at that point to really take into account which direction that we were going. And I do have solutions that I've been developing since 2011 for the issues around homelessness, affordable housing development, mental health, public safety, and I'm happy to share them with you tonight.
All right, then we'll start having other things. Angela, and down real quick. Okay. You've all been in and around San Francisco for quite a long time. Many of you have been in and out of government for as long, going back to the Agnos versus Jordan years. And I've been covering debates like this since the Agnos versus Jordan years, and the issues are the same. So, my question is, what are you going to do differently? 1 minute on homelessness.
Well, first of all, Phil, they're not really the same. When I ran for mayor in 2003 with Gavin Newsom, we were stepping over people who were sleeping on the streets. We did something about that in 2004. We created the plan that housed 11,000 people. In 2012, we were not stepping over people who were in the street. In 2018, you are literally having tent encampments and people on every other block of the city, and all sorts of filthy streets because DPW is not doing its job. So it is totally different atmosphere. I'm a born and raised San Franciscan. I have never seen San Francisco look like this. We are one of the most beautiful cities in the world, and it's a disgrace the way we look right now. It has never been like this before, Phil.
No, but it's been on the trajectory.
Nobody's been on the trajectory.
Gavin Newsom came in, dirty streets. He left, dirty streets. Homeless grew. Every administration comes in saying we're going to change it. Every administration goes out and it's worse.
No, I disagree with you. When Gavin Newsom was mayor of San Francisco, we literally housed people in permanent supportive housing with a lack of recidivism of 94%. We took people off the street and gave them housing. Then when Gavin went to be lieutenant governor, Mayor Ed Lee took the buildings we had in the pipeline for the formerly homeless and put it into affordable housing, which of course is needed, but it's not true that Gavin didn't do something. That isn't true at all. We did a great deal from 2004 to 2011. You can look at the statistics in the report that came out in 2014.
London?
Thank you. I'm glad you asked this question. And you know what's interesting about growing up in San Francisco, especially in public housing, you watch as all of these policies and all of these things happen around you, and you wonder, why is it so hard for people in my community, people who are on the verge of homelessness, and even homeless people, to actually get access to all this affordable housing that we build on a regular basis? A building pops up, you don't know anyone that's in that building that came from your neighborhood. It's why I work hard for neighborhood preference legislation, making sure that there is a direct connection between the people who live in the communities and access to affordable housing. It's why I work so hard to take 179 empty public housing units, give the Housing Authority $2 million, and formerly homeless families were directly moved out of our shelters into those units. We have to make sure that there is a direct connection between what we do and our policies and how it actually helps somebody. And I think that's been the problem of the past. It is all these rules, all these regulations, they don't necessarily work for people, and that's why we're seeing the challenges that we see on our streets today.
You got your minute.
Okay. So, homelessness. It's been estimated that about 30% of the homeless on the streets are not from here, that they've come from somewhere else. My plan, we have to shut the floodgates. There's a constant influx. If we've got 7,500 homeless now, that's approximately 2,500, that my plan, we need to stop the incentives, stop helping the people, stop enticing people who are getting on buses and finding their way here to take advantage of our generosity, the benefits. Now, that's not a perfect plan for everyone, but it will start somewhere. We need to start somewhere.
Thank you.
So my second year on the board, I actually decided to go through the shelter reservation system and spend a night in one of our homeless shelters to understand what that experience was like for so many people who live on our streets. It is an incredibly frustrating process. I know a lot of you as business owners or small business owners go through the rigmarole of the city process. Our residents that live on the streets go through that same process, and it's incredibly frustrating. One, we need to streamline people's access to both shelter and housing. Two, we have to acknowledge that homelessness is no longer just an economic issue, and we treat it purely as a poverty issue. It is a public health issue. When I stayed in the shelter that night, I saw that people were much older and much sicker than I had realized. After that stay, I fought to get full-time nurses in all of our single adult shelters in my district, which we now have. And I worked with Mayor Ed Lee, who granted our office $6 million to build out a 24-hour medical respite shelter, a shelter for the homeless, but staffed by nurses, clinicians, and psychologists. And we cut the ribbon on that in the South of Market in December, and I look forward to expanding those types of initiatives to help people who are sick on our streets.
So our homeless population continues to change. It is older, it is sicker, And no surprise to many of you, about 40% are dealing with mental health issues or addiction issues. And right now we are recycling them through our criminal justice system. About 50% of those in our county jail are receiving mental health services. That is a waste of limited resources, doesn't do them any good, doesn't do our pocketbook any good. The county jail should not be the largest provider of mental health services. We do need a big and bold new idea, and that would be a mental health justice center. So if we have someone in our custody, and we can give them the option of sitting in the jail cell or coming into the justice center and being assessed, diagnosed, and treated, and we can resolve mental health crises, begin recovery of addiction, and then rather than just put them back out on the street, we're going to have $2 billion of state money statewide, $100 million for San Francisco, to build about 400 permanent supportive housing units specifically for those formerly homeless with mental health issues.
After the 2015 election, I started a nonprofit called the St. Francis Homelessness Challenge to specifically address the encampment crisis and to come up with these solutions. So you should know that $8.7 million is currently being spent on DPW to clean up encampments and just shuffle them, and $20.6 million is being spent on encampments by SFPD. I've been working with encampment residents, the direct service workers on the ground, and also the department heads, and that's why I'm very suited to be in this position and leading this process, because I know what needs to happen. We need to stabilize that population with what I'm calling transitional villages, because there are 3,000 people on the street right now without access to toilets or secure sleep or a pathway and a ladder to housing. And then we have to work, like Jane said, to work on those shelter systems. I worked in transitional shelters, I know best practices. And then we need to create a plan for creating that long-term supportive housing that Angela is talking about. So we need to really work on each rung of the ladder right now. And I can do this with the current budget, stabilizing the encampment community in a way that's actually going to work with neighborhoods and neighbors, and it could actually be good for our tourist industry, the way that we would do this. I went to Austin, Texas recently, and they have a community first village, so these are things that I know how to actually implement.
Okay, let's just follow up. We all hear about these plans, we all hear about transitions, we hear about go here, it should be an option, you shouldn't be in jail, you should be in a mental health court where if you are seeking services, they are provided. We're going to drill down just a little bit. A lot of people out on the streets, you walk around, chances are if you're walking down the street, you're going to bump into somebody that's wearing just maybe a sleeping bag and nothing else, and mumbling to themselves. My question is, two questions real quick, just real quick answer. Should people be allowed, mentally ill people be allowed to make the choice of being on the street? Because everything is contingent on them wanting to move on. Should that be there? The second question is, all of your plans, we're spending about $300 million right now on homelessness. Do you see spending more, less, or the same? Real quick, right down. Start with you this time, but in a minute.
Sure. So I have a background in mental health, and so the key thing is Progress Foundation does a really good job of having individual-focused care, and our goal is to have people in the least restrictive, most autonomous setting possible. That doesn't mean that everybody can have complete autonomy and without restriction, but the model of these transitional villages builds up that support. People are signing a license agreement like they do for an SRO, and they have responsibilities and benefits.
Right down. Should it be optional?
Oh, so if you can't actually behave and agree in the community, then you need to have more restrictions until you can actually get to that place.
So should the police put them someplace behind locked up?
Well, these transitional villages can have varying degrees of security and
You're talking
restrictions.
about a secure place where there's not
depending upon the needs. So, because I would say about 85% of the people I've worked with in encampments, they actually can live with basic agreements and rules, but there's a certain percentage that needs more support.
Senator Leno?
So in Phil's perfect world, we could do anything with anybody, but there are some
Yours as well.
there are some constitutional civil liberty restrictions. So we do have conservatorship, so if someone is a risk to themselves or others, we can have a court put that person in a conservatorship. Senator Scott Wiener is working on a bill that will expand the definition. I know Supervisor Breed is also working on shifting where this occurs from the district attorney to the city attorney. So, yes, they, when at risk to themselves or someone else, should not be allowed on the street without assistance.
That's a 5150.
Yes.
And we have thousands of those. But after 72 hours, that person is either sober or straightened up and back on the streets and repeat it again. The question is, should that be an option for them to go back out on the street?
So this is where we need to get creative, Phil. For example, there are other cities that are doing things better. We have around 250 people who are our most frequent flyers using our services, jail, emergency rooms, ambulances, who are alcoholic. And we spend about $13 million a year on this small group, 250 people, about $60,000 each. In Seattle, they have something called a wet house. Now, it's very controversial, but we've got to look at new and different ideas. The results are very successful. About 50% of those in these wet houses are significantly drinking less. They're off the street, and they, by choice, stay in this home with services for them. So again, different ideas. In Vancouver, they're doing safe injection sites. I know we're moving forward with that here, and we should. Different approaches in other cities, we can learn from best practices.
So I always like to correct some people's assumptions around our budget, around what we spend on homelessness. Of that $250 to $300 million budget, 60% of that goes towards the supportive housing that Angela was talking about. So 60% of that dollars are housing people that can no longer stay on the street. That leaves about a remaining $100 to $180 million remaining. That's actually not divided amongst the 7,000 people that you hear about in the homeless count. We have roughly 7,000 people that are either sleeping on our streets or in our shelter on any given night. But there's actually 17,000 different people that go through our homeless system process every year, because there's a lot of people that aren't homeless every single night, either because they've got a couch to stay on or an SRO to stay on for a few nights. So when you break that dollar amount down, it really amounts to more to about $5,000 to $10,000 per individual in San Francisco. And we absolutely have to increase our revenue invested in solving our homeless crisis if we truly want to make a dent. Now, on the question of what we do with people who are incredibly sick, we need to expand things like the medical respite shelter that I talked about earlier today, and the Hummingbird Center at General Hospital. We also need to expand our behavioral health court, because there are people that do need to go into treatment and aren't in the right state to accept or not accept. And a court system can judiciously decide when to actually impose treatment on them versus just an average, social worker. And so these are the types of programs that we need to expand on. Finally, we absolutely do need long-term housing. Salt Lake City did it. They did a Housing First program where they worked on substance abuse and mental health issues after people were housed. We need to get people in housing without asking questions first.
I take a slightly different approach to this. We should never, ever have had people living on the streets. Living in a tent is not okay. It was never okay. It should never, ever be okay. It's humiliating. It is inhumane. And any of our city's leadership currently or in the past that has fought to have that is just unbelievable. It should not ever, ever live on the street. Whether or not the individual is accepting or not to this, whether or not they are able to make a decision, they should not be on the street. And if they resist, they should not be living on the street. As far as the cost is $300 million, was it?
Yeah, that's not including what SF General and the Health Department.
Correct. And I've actually been in hospitals and I've seen people come in for a few hours to try and sober up. I've been at St. Mary's Hospital and seen people come in on stretchers myself personally just in the last couple of weeks. This is unacceptable. Unacceptable across the board, A to Z, unacceptable. It should never have become norm. It should never have become where we are numb to this. And I will not expand monies. I will cut back monies on this. Super.
It's interesting because when I think about the people who are out there, they're not necessarily harming anyone else and themselves. they're just not in what my grandmother would say, in their right minds, and they need to be cared for. And so what I think is, yes, we need to do everything we can to get people healthy and stabilized. It's why I'm proposing changes to our conservatorship program. This is a public health crisis. All these people out here on our streets who are suffering from mental illness, it could be any one of us at any given time. And wouldn't you want someone to do all that they could to help you? So part of what I have been doing, and I started working with Mayor Lee on this last year, identifying those people, the large load of 5150 cases, working with Dignity Health. We have 40 new mental health stabilization beds opening. We know there are challenges with Medi-Cal, which make it difficult to open an entire facility. We know that the court systems are challenging. It may seem like it's easy, but usually they give us a temporary conservatorship situation with an individual, and then they're right back on the streets. I mean, there's a guy, I have 3 people on my caseload that I've been working with. There's a guy who has a family, who's willing to support him. He is not violent. He is such a good man, but he can't take care of himself. We got him into the navigation center. He wouldn't stay in the navigation center. His son tried to get him to stay with him. He wouldn't stay with his son. And my thing is, we got to do more, and we got to make sure that people are conserved so that someone else can make the kinds of decisions for them in order to help save their lives. It's not compassion to just leave people out on the streets to suffer with mental illness. And as your mayor, I will do everything I can to make sure that we make the kind of changes. Yes, it will be controversial. Yes, people will fight against it, but what you will see is the difference on the streets and the people that are out there, sadly, who need the kind of help and support that they need through the conservatorship program and our health services.
Your question, fellas, should they be allowed to be on the streets? The new legislation by Senator Weiner of conservatorship, I am still looking at. Conservatorship is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is a very serious thing to do to a person. So let's take Phil's example of the young man walking down the street who has no clothes on, he's got a blanket on. Should he be allowed to walk down the street with no clothes on and a blanket? Is he hurting anybody? Is he hurting himself? If he's not hurting anybody and he's not hurting himself, he probably has a constitutional right to walk down the streets in the United States of America. Having said that, do we want to help him? Does he want our help? I have been working in homelessness since the late 80s. I have met thousands and thousands of homeless people. It is a rare, rare case that somebody doesn't accept help. Very rare case. I can triage a homeless person within 5 minutes of talking to them, whether they need to go to general hospital, whether they need to go to a mental illness program, whether they need to go to a drug rehab, whether they're triple diagnosed. We have to make sure that they go to the right programs. You can't just steal somebody's liberty because you don't like looking at them. I'm a civil rights trial lawyer, and I can tell you, you can't just steal their liberty. Imagine if it's your child, or imagine if it's a minority, or an immigrant, or someone that someone doesn't like seeing on the street, and all of a sudden there's a conservatorship. No, it isn't right to automatically conserve people. It's 24/7 taking away all of their United States of America rights. And I would fight for that. Now, the mentally ill person that's walking down the street, that's banging their head on a wall, that is walking up to you and trying to hit you, is a different issue. That person needs to be taken off the street. Now, Amy mentioned Progress Foundation. Progress Foundation is wonderful for mental illness. However, it ends. So the city and county of San Francisco throws millions and millions of dollars away in giving Progress Foundation contracts, and then after 6 months, that person who has been allegedly rehab is put back into the timberline. So that can't happen. They have to go into Progress Foundation, go into transitional housing, and then into permanent supportive housing, or into general hospital, or into hospice, or into whatever medical facility they need. The permanent supportive housing that we did in the 2000s had minute clinics on the first floor, and they were within 6 blocks of every building that we built, and it worked perfectly. As I said, nobody left. But can you just take a person off the street who is not hurting anybody and isn't hurting himself in the United States of America? No, you can't. In other countries of this world, it happens all the time. And they're locked up, put away, solitary confinement, and live the miserable rest of their lives because nobody took care of them properly.
All right. Some people might say that that person is on the street, they can't take care of themselves properly, and they have a meth habit. We're seeing them, you know, we're letting them do that.
No, you let them get help.
If they want to.
Absolutely.
And so your thing is, you want it to be gone.
No, my thing is that we need to go out and do it properly. We don't have a problem with people going out and talking to homeless people in front. I housed 3 people 2 days ago. We went out and cleaned 6 streets. Filthy, sports fans. Filthy. Okay? We went out and cleaned the streets. And cleaning the streets, 3 homeless people, a couple in a doorway that would have broken your heart. A young man and a young woman in their 20s. Just a mess. And another African-American gentleman over at the park. Okay? Denzel. They came, I called people that I know in the department, and they got housed immediately, and get triaged into the proper places. Not one of them said no, and the couple was chronically homeless. People that have lived on the streets for 3 to 6 years. People have been a long time. And as far as I know of, as of 3 hours ago, they were still in the facility where we took them.
We'll keep an eye on it.
Remember that $30 million is currently being spent by DPW and SFPD just to respond to encampments.
Yeah.
And so if we stabilize people with that money instead by having a place to belong, we're not going to deal with the same kind of outbursts, because I actually got punched in the face on Market Street in December by someone who was carrying a sleeping bag, and she was most likely going to be released later that night. And I saw her on Valencia Street last week. And we need to create these spaces for people, and if they can't follow those rules and agreements and are actually causing harm to others, then they need more restrictions, but there has to be a pathway to more autonomy, and that can happen through healing.
All right. Next up, housing, real quick. This is 1 minute. Try to keep an eye on the timing. We're going to start with you. San Francisco needs an estimated 5,000 homes annually to be built. Where are they going to go?
So let's just understand that 45,000 units have already been entitled in the city. So this next year, the mayor's job is really going to be streamlining this process to be able to build what's already in the pipeline. I'm the only candidate that I know so far, but I hope that's not the same at the end of this night, that's really excited about additional dwelling units, because the city's planning department did an assessment a few years ago. Scott Wiener really promoted this, and we have 37,000 parcels citywide that can have an additional dwelling unit within the building envelope. Why is this important? Because it costs about $200,000 to build an additional dwelling unit, where it costs anywhere from $600,000 to $700,000 to build a high-rise new development unit. And so we have this opportunity. If we had $1 billion housing bond, we could actually have 5,000 additional dwelling units working with property owners in a revolving financing fund. We could do the construction, build the trades, build jobs for locals, and that's 5,000 units distributed throughout the city over these next coming years.
And then after that, Senator Leno, where are they going to go?
So, with all these issues, Phil, that we're
40
talking
square
about,
miles. We're not adding any space. So,
as with all of these issues that we're talking about, homelessness and the streets and affordability, these are not unique to San Francisco. These are regional problems, statewide problems, but let's just deal with the region. And I'm sure Jim Wonderwood would be nudging us to just focus on that. We're going to need to work with our regional partners if we're really going to turn the dial on this and get anywhere beyond where we are right now. We get a large share of our affordable or below market rate housing right now from our inclusionary zoning ordinance, a mandate for all new residential development percentage must be below market rate. I authored that ordinance in 2000, and we brought all the stakeholders together, worked together to get it passed at the Board of Supervisors, the for-profit developers, the not-for-profit developers, and we've now built upwards of 4,000 below market rate units as a result of that one ordinance. So I know how to get this
where are they
done.
going to go? Everybody's pushing for it. Do you want height limits to go up? Are you okay with height limits going up under your administration?
So there's a new central SOMA plan. I'm not here to endorse it entirely, but through a local planning process, yes, we have. Keep in mind, we are building more housing per capita than any county in the state. And yes, the demand keeps growing here. Interesting report. out of the Anderson School of Management, which is a little bit sobering, but I want to share it with you. They concluded that for a city to reduce its housing costs by 10%, we need to increase our supply by 20%. In San Francisco, that would be about 70,000 units. If we're lucky, we'll get there in 10 years or more. And that means the median price would fall from 1.5 to 1.35. So yes, we need to be...
7-story buildings out in the Richmond, you want the height limits go on? Where's it going to go?
There are smart growth principles, which are serving us well, not just here, but around the state. And that means, yes, along transit-rich corridors, we can build denser and taller buildings. Now, I've said this to some of the YIMBY folks recently, that I'm not talking about building an 8-story building in the middle of a single-family block of homes. Their response was, we are. So, you know, there are those, and I would say this with due respect. These are young folks who are adamant that they want to have a future in the city, and I appreciate that they do. And they're all about build, build, build. But we also love this city for a reason. Its character and its quality. And we have to be respectful of that. We also have to be respectful of how we plan and how we build.
Supervisor?
So Amy had mentioned the 75,000 units that are already entitled but not under construction. About 30,000 of those are in 3 major projects throughout the city: Treasure Island, Park Merced, Shipyards, the 2 Hoga 7 projects, and Schlage Lock. The major challenge that these developments are having is a problem that actually was a good thing that we negotiated, which is that the developers were going to pre-finance the infrastructure to build up these major new projects: sewage, streets, electricity grid, etc. What we're seeing right now as these big projects are entitled is that developers are having a hard time pre-financing the infrastructure. I'm suggesting that we move forward with the citywide IEFD, Infrastructure Financing District, so we can help developers pay down for the infrastructure so we can build the 30,000 units of housing that we've already approved, much of which are achieving 20 to 30% affordable and middle-income housing. That is incredibly important for us to do. These are projects that have already gone through all the hoops, and they're ready to get built. Second, I'm proposing a $1 billion general obligation bond. This would be used to build affordable housing on sites that we've already deeded, but don't have gap financing in order to build 100% affordable housing, and also to do something that the city has started to do so far, which is small site acquisition, which is buying small properties from 3 to 50 unit rent controlled buildings and taking them off the speculative market and preserving them as affordable housing.
Are you okay with higher density along the corridors?
Well, I think if you look in my district,
I would.
there are very few projects that I haven't added density and height. I think, by the way, in answer to your question, Fury Boulevard is the perfect next corridor for us to do a special area plan to build up density and height. We are going to need to build more here in San Francisco. We can't continue to go at the same rate, but we don't have to destroy neighborhoods in order to do that. Not every district needs to look like the South of Market, but we can build more 3 to 5 unit buildings here in San Francisco. In fact, they're much more affordable to construct, and we can do them much more quickly, and they'll be more affordable simply by the cost. We can also, as Amy mentioned, support our accessory dwelling unit program. We haven't been building as many ADUs as we had hoped from previous legislation. We're finding, actually, that the planning department doesn't have a consistent approach to the design mandates on all of these single homeowners. We find out that fire and health all have different standards and building codes that they expect on ADUs to be built up. We should be streamlining that process because ADUs are actually the fastest and most affordable way for us to bring more units onto the market without destroying the character of neighborhoods or increasing the envelope of our existing residential lots.
Okay, you've got that one down. Richie?
So again, I take the contrarian approach to this. There's no way that I would ever let the west side of San Francisco be bulldozed and put up 20, 30, 40-story apartment buildings, 5,000 units, 10,000 units. It's absolutely ludicrous. And there are people here that believe that we should build to make San Francisco look like Dubai or look like Hong Kong. Absolutely no way. And also, I do not consider single-family ownership as being racist, which I do see on several YIMBY sites that they call that single-family as racist. We simply don't have the infrastructure. You try and build a building, you do not have the infrastructure, the transportation, the utilities, Muni, we don't have any of that. It's just a pipe dream. We need instead to think about decentralizing by not having everyone that wants to live in San Francisco be able to live here. There is no reason why that people that want to live here should have a right to live here.
That's interesting.
Because I
have like an immigration policy?
no. Although immigration, there are people here in our city that
I know, I hear it all the time.
immigration.
Outsiders, whether they're techie or they're from someplace else, yeah, you know, we really...
No, decentralized, where you have the suburbs will start building up. This is how urban planning has been for decades.
They don't want to live there.
Well,
Supervisor.
Thank you for the question. We built 98 senior units on an underutilized parking lot near public housing. We just purchased the McDonald's site on Haight and Stanton, and we're going to build 100% affordable units on that site. And let me tell you, we purchased that property from McDonald's for below market rate. We have got to get creative and find underutilized properties which exist all over San Francisco, opportunities to build more housing and build more housing faster. I grew up in San Francisco. A lot of my friends don't live here anymore. It's not just because they can't afford it, it's because we don't have this long-term strategic plan for how we plan to build housing for all income levels. Low, moderate, middle. We have got to do it all. It's why I work so hard on changing the inclusionary affordable housing laws so that middle-class families could actually qualify for affordable housing. The teachers, the janitors, people who made too much to qualify for affordable housing, but not enough to qualify for market rate. So we have to get creative, and we have to make sure our policy, they may sound good, talking about ADUs and all these different things that we're talking about here, but they are not actually working for the people that we need to house in San Francisco. We have to make the connections, and I plan to do that with long-term strategic planning around building more and building more for all income levels.
Building more. All right.
And underutilized properties and modular housing and a lot of the things that are in my housing platform, which is on my website, londonformayor.com.
I was wondering. All right, there you go.
LondonGreen.com
Get to the website.
That's why. It was not LondonGreen.com, right?
It's londonformayor.com.
All right,
I know
Angela,
where it redirects to.
where are you going to put them? You go out, everyone wants to build them, where are you going to put them?
You know, talking about long-term strategic plans, where was the long-term strategic plan when we allowed all of these massive companies to come into San Francisco in the last 8 years? Who planned for the traffic? Who planned for the Ubers and the Chariot the Lyfts to come in, use our city? They need to be taxed. That's a business tax. They're coming here to do business, and they need to be taxed. Our infrastructure is literally going to hell because of the amount of cars. Where were the long-term plans then? As far as housing goes,
No, Angela, there were long-term plans. And the idea was they were, we weren't going to be driving cars, you see. That's why the range we took the traffic out and we put the lights in. But the people are people.
Yeah.
So they left the car at home and called Uber. So you see, so that is part of the long-term plan, is that people don't follow the plan.
The long-term plan.
The long-term plan was we're all going to be taking units.
If that was part of the long-term plan, it was messed up, and
That's what was being
the head of MTA needs to leave. Because if that's what you call long-term planning, it's the biggest mess up in this city. I mean, it's ridiculous trying to get down some of the streets in San Francisco. So I'm going to have to disagree with you once again, Mr. I'm sorry, but that is absolutely absurd. And I understand the story. I mean, the situation with jobs. Of course, jobs. But what about all the kids that are getting on the Google buses in the morning, thousands of them over on Cesar Chavez, and going down to Mountain View to do their job and come back and live in San Francisco? That's all wonderful. Everybody wants to live in San Francisco. I don't blame them. But you've got to give back in. You've got to give back. You've got to give back to the communities in San Francisco and not to the things that you want to give to, which is why we have filthy streets, people living on the streets, and horrible infrastructure. If we were to have an earthquake tomorrow, we'd be in big trouble. The cisterns don't even have water in them. and yet we're worried about giving everybody, a couple of billionaires, some tax breaks.
All right.
That's okay. Okay, let me get to the housing. Let me get to the housing.
10 seconds.
I just voted yes on a 380 unit place at the corner of 16th and Mission. Now, normally speaking, that would have been.
Let's wrap it. Are you
You asked me about it.
the housing was, are you for higher density?
Am I
Where are you
for
gonna put
high
it?
density?
Yeah.
I am not for large corridors on Cary Street.
Thank you.
Good.
All right.
Sit down, tell me sit down, sit down.
Next
Thank you all.
question. Stay standing. Yeah, simple yes or no.
Yes.
Let's try it.
Okay.
Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf.
Yes.
Get out the wording on the ice rinks coming.
Absolutely.
If you were mayor, would you have done it?
Absolutely.
Thank you. London Breed.
Yes.
Richie.
Absolutely not, and Libby Schaaf should be arrested.
Shane Kim.
Absolutely.
Mark Lennon.
Without a doubt.
Yes.
All right, next question. Next question, real quick. If you are mayor, parking tickets. They're at $87 now. What are they going to be under you? Angela?
I don't know, I guess.
87, 70 to 87 bucks for
Get
parking ticket.
if I can get back into those Ubers so they can profit me now.
There we go. London, 70 to $87 a ticket in San Francisco for overstaying parking. You with that? Should it's too much? Is it too little? Should we do more? What do you think?
Bill, come on now. Ask us some questions about some other
No.
transit.
That's why I'm asking that question.
I don't.
Because we talk about the middle class.
I don't
we
want.
talk
I
about.
tried. I don't want to get a parking ticket for
Right.
$87.
But that's what you charge. That's what this
That's a lot. Yes.
That's a lot. And if you're a working family and you drive a car and you get hit with that, that's a lot.
It is a lot. Yes.
Okay, so do you
Yes.
think it's okay?
I'm not saying that it's okay. I'm just saying that's a lot of money for a damn ticket. That's a lot of damn money. I don't want an $87 ticket. Period.
I think it depends on what area of the city you get the ticket. You have demand meter pricing, maybe you have demand ticket fines.
Okay, Supervisor Kim?
I think the ticket prices are too high, and I worked 2 years ago to lower our tollway fees, which were frankly exorbitant and the highest in the country. We are charging way too much on these fees, and we have to think about our low-income families as well. I supported, actually with President Breed, a task force to relook at our municipal fines and fees program because they have a disproportionate burden on our working-class families. It's okay to have a penalty for breaking the law, but we shouldn't be impacting your ability to pay rent or to put food on the table. And frankly, we do see that. I think the parking tickets are way too high. I also don't think that we're appropriately investing our enforcement in the right places. I would rather we were enforcing double parking in the bike lane and muni lanes, which is congesting our streets. But we should have a fee, but I am looking at reevaluating all of them.
All right, Senator Lennon?
I think I'm of like mind to Jane, and you've got to ask, why did they get so high? How did this happen? Because of Prop 13, we have limited ways, we as a municipality, to raise funds for the programs that we want to keep whole. So the Board of Supervisors can raise these fees. And like any flat fee or tax, it impacts those with the least the most. And that's where it's troublesome. We should be looking at more thoughtful revenue streams, some new revenue streams. And let me just suggest one. It's in its infancy right now, so I'm not here to tell you I know all the details about it. But corporations are getting a massive tax cut because of this so-called president in Washington, D.C. 35% down to 21%. Multi-billion-dollar corporations are going to benefit by the billions. Why don't we figure out a Trump tax break take-back? And we would just, yes you did, we're talking about this, we would take back just a slight amount of it, and we could put it toward building more shelter for those who are formerly homeless, put it toward affordable housing for low-income and middle-income people. There are a lot of needs. You've got to go where the money is, and that's where the money is right now.
Well, I'm glad that the idea is taking root because I've been talking about that for the last month or so. But I'm going to take a slightly different approach, and I actually am a low-income working family. So I didn't have a car for the last 10 years that I was in San Francisco. I rode a bike and used public transit. But for my work with encampments, I started to have a truck. And it's actually very cheap. For 1 year, I only pay under $100 to park on our streets for free for the Z permit that I have. And I actually think that's very reasonable. And then I know that if I don't move my car according to the schedule and it's online, I can check, then I get an $87 parking fine. And I think that we actually give away our parking spaces for the most part. We should figure out how to recoup some of that. And I am a low-income working class person. But Jane was talking about this idea of taxing or having larger fees for people who are having moving violations. TNCs, they did a study, and the vast majority of tickets for moving violations, for blocking bike lanes, for double parking, all of these things are Uber and Lyft. And so if we can't regulate because the state is hamstringing us right now, we can't actually do the regulations locally, do we need to think about focusing in on TNC moving violations? So this is something to consider.
All right, everybody has someplace to go. So this last question is, keep it to a minute and you'll make your next appointment. Starting with you. And it's a simple question. In 1 minute, what's the best thing about San Francisco?
The best thing about San Francisco is that when I started to get involved in local politics in 2011, it actually is such a small city that if you start to go to City Hall, then you can know all of the players pretty quickly. And if you do your research, you can actually understand how it is that you can start affecting zoning code and planning and working together with your neighbors. And this is the city of St. Francis, and I want to infuse our policies with the spirit of St. Francis, who said, first do what's necessary, then do what's possible, and soon you'll be doing the impossible. And so people have acted like these have been intractable problems, like you were talking about, Mark. And the encampment situation is not intractable. We have to think about it as a manageable issue, and we need to stabilize San Francisco, and then we can plan out 7 generations ahead, like our indigenous.
Okay, your minute's way up. Obviously, you don't have enough place to go real quick. Mark,
I love that San Francisco could not only welcome, but provide a life I could not have imagined or dreamed of for a young gay Jewish boy to find a home, a place to make a family, to fall in love, to build a business, and to live life to its fullest. That dream is currently a bit out of reach. What I did 40 years ago, I don't know unless you are a crack whiz of tech scientists to be able to do that today. And we've got to expand that opportunity for far, far more people. So that's what motivates me. I know that you can't flip a switch and go back 40 years and everything's going to be more affordable again. But we can put that as our vision so that folks can come here, those who are here can stay here, the neighborhoods aren't ripped apart, not just by the ice raids, but by displacement and by gentrification, that we can have growth, we can have a strong, thriving economy, which we must have, and make San Francisco a place where working people can afford to live.
Supervisor Kim, what's the best thing about San Francisco in your opinion?
Well, I do love that San Francisco is a sanctuary city, but as Mark talked about, what's the point of having the best policies and services in the world if people can't afford to live in San Francisco? One of the things that I love about representing San Francisco is that we are a liberal city and we are a wealthy city, which means that we can afford to enact dream policies that other municipalities can't even fantasize about. We made community college free in San Francisco. As a progressive candidate, I know that one of my challenges is going to our employer community and saying that I am not anti-business. I want our businesses to stay in San Francisco. You are part of the reason why we are growing revenue and growing wealth in the city. But what I'm asking our business communities to work with local government to make this a great city for all of us. So I'm asking you to invest more in our city, to invest so we can actually make a dent in homelessness, and We can invest in early childhood education and childcare for our children 0 to 3 who currently often have no place to go. We can make this a great city for all of us, but we need everyone on board to work in partnership together so that we can grow our middle class again and support our working class to stay here in San Francisco.
I left San Francisco, fell in love with it 17 years ago. And what I see now is when I walk around the Richmond district up near Seacliff, I go out to Lansing, I look out over the ocean, I take in the views, I take in the sea, air, all the tourists walking around. San Francisco's #1 industry, or among the top, is tourism. And we absolutely need to be sure that we keep tourists coming here, spending their dollars here, not to get them pissed off and upset by all the homelessness and the dirtiness of our streets. So I like that we have the natural beauty. This is what everyone talks about. San Francisco is a beautiful city, from north to south, from Golden Gate Bridge, the parks. We need to keep them first class. I also, in San Francisco, quoting from late Mayor Lee, he was able to get into his, anytime he spoke, he used the word diversity. And this is very important. Our city is a very diverse, not just progressive, not just moderate, but also we have all different types of people, different religions, different languages, nationalities, and political affiliations.
Supervisor Breed, your favorite thing about San Francisco?
My grandmother raised me in a public housing unit. I took a public bus to a public school and went to a public university, and here I am, president of the Board of Supervisors and running for mayor. And what's so amazing about San Francisco is that it was possible for me. And I work hard every single day to make sure that it's not just possible for me. I know it can be possible for so many people who aren't as fortunate to be in a situation like I'm fortunate to be in a situation. And so every day of my life is dedicated to making sure that other young people and people who grow up in the city, especially people who grow up in poverty, have that same opportunity. San Francisco is an amazing place, and we have to do better so that we don't continue to leave people behind. We have to do better so that the city that we love, the city that many of us have been fortunate enough to have incredible opportunities, is the shining jewel of the world that it is meant to be.
My grandmother Aliota was born on Filbert Street, in the house on Filbert, 572 Filbert. My father, Mayor Joseph Aliota, was born at 572 Filbert. I was born at St. Mary's Hospital, no, strike that, St. Francis Hospital. St. Francis Hospital in San Francisco. My 4 children were born and raised in San Francisco, and my 5 grandchildren were born and raised in San Francisco. San Francisco is one of the most incredible cities in this world. As I said earlier, you can go from every region of the world and find it in San Francisco. You can go to Mexico, you can go to Russia, you can go to France, you can go to Italy, you can go to Africa, you can go all over the world by just being in this incredible city. And that's why I'm running for mayor of San Francisco. Because the soul of our city is being taken away by the fact that the streets are so filthy, the fact our children cannot play in the streets because there are needles, the fact that people are sleeping on the streets as though we're a third world, the fact that, I say this all the time and people say, what does that even mean? The fact that we can't even have our flower stands anymore. It's symbolic of the fact that the soul of our city is being taken away. And that's what I love about San Francisco, its soul and its spirit. And that's what's being taken away. Thank you all so much for coming out today. Thank you.
Thank you all. I want to say, I said thank you, Angela. It wouldn't be a mayor's race without you. Bring it to. I want to thank everybody.